Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is Adventures in Dolls, the United Federation of Doll Clubs YouTube channel. My name's Karen Allen. Today, our program is presented by Robert Tonner, and it is the life and times of Bernard Lipfert, doll creator in his own right, and also an importer exporter. So before we get to the program, let me remind you, if you have any friends, you should invite them to join you, and invite them to watch these programs. You can leave any comments in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. And be sure, if you like our programs and like this channel, be sure you like and subscribe so that it boosts our rating with YouTube. Also, you don't want to miss your next adventure in dolls.
The stupendous, amazing, mind-blowing doll art of Bernard Lipfert. And when you get done with this, you'll see why. If you're not familiar with him, you're kind of in for a treat because you're going to see somebody who defined what dolls in the last century look like pretty much throughout the entire century. So Bernard Lipfert was born either in 1886 or 1888. I've gotten conflicting reports on when that was, but we get the gist. He's was born in the 1800s, and in Germany, and he immigrated to America in 1912. That is pretty much confirmed. He did odd jobs in America. He actually left Europe so that to escape World War I. Or to things were getting really hairy there, so he was looking to get out. So he moved to America in 1912. Had to go back, and he met a woman that became his wife after that 1912. Long story, she passed away, unfortunately, but they did have a son, and he came back to America and was here by 1925. So he was in his mid to late 30s when he settled here permanently. Now, this probably isn't very nice, but every time I see this picture of Bernard Lipfert, it reminds me of Fred Mertz. So you be the judge. I'm not gonna, but anyway, this is Bernard Lipfert sculpting in his room. He had a house on Long Island for many, many years, I think like 40 something years, and he died on Long Island in New York. Okay, in the 1920s, he was getting his feet wet in what was going on in American doll making. With what happened with World War I, pre-World War I, most dolls were imported from Europe. Like Germany, France, they were all big doll head makers. And the United States, the doll manufacturers would put the dolls together. Would put the dolls together and dress them and all this kind of stuff, but they would get the heads and the bodies and stuff like that from Europe. But with World War I, all that was cut off, so that American doll manufacturers started to come in their own, and they realized that they had to start making their own dolls and doll bodies. So Bernard Lipfert came from 4 generations of toy and doll makers in Germany. He worked, his first full-time job in doll making was at Horseman, believe it or not. And one of the first groups of dolls attributed to him were the Jean Carr Kids. Jean Carr Kids were a comic strip, and the dolls were done in composition for Horseman. There were, I think, a half a dozen different styles of this doll, but this is one of them. I don't think they show off his talent to the best, but that's a Jean Carr Kids. But that got him started, and he was at Horseman. Then this happened. This is the Bubbles doll from F&B. So Horseman had him employed full time, but they would only pay him, a few dollars per doll head, like maybe $5 for a head that was going to go ahead and make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, who knows at the time, but a lot of money for Horseman. But he gets like $5, and he felt like it was his art. He had a family in New York, and he wanted, he needed more money. So he started taking on freelance jobs at night, and he felt that, if it was at night on his own time, he would be allowed to do this. So he designed this doll, Bubbles, for F&B at night at his home, which was great because Bubbles was a huge, tremendous success, except that Horseman found out about it. And they were not happy about this. So they made him do a knockoff of Bubbles for them, which was Dimples. So this is the Dimples doll done for Horseman in the mid to late 20s. F&B was furious that he did a knockoff of their doll, and Horseman was furious that F&B had Bubbles. So one thing led to another, and it led them to court, where the companies sued each other. I think they sued Lipfert, whatever. It was a mess. But Lipfert presented this kind of bogus idea that dolls, one doll, if it has 7% different from another doll, that there shouldn't be a copyright issue, and the judge bought it. So Lipfert actually won the lawsuit, and he was free to do whatever he wanted. Now, I haven't been able to find out if he was fired from Horseman or if he just decided that he was going to go freelance. But he did continue to do dolls for Horseman. But this is the start of his real career, when he was freed up to do dolls for other companies. So one of the first, other than Bubbles and Dimples, the first big hit he had, and this was a tremendous, huge hit, was Patsy, that he designed for F&B. Now, Patsy was based on a doll that he had done in Europe when he was working at a doll company in Europe. But this was introduced in 1927 and was different in a few ways. First of all, it had this very idealized, cute sort of flapper look. And it had extra outfits that you could buy to go with it, which was kind of unusual at the time. Pre-Patsy, most of the dolls were baby dolls. It was more of a nurturing sort of play pattern for the kids. With Patsy coming on the scene, it became more of my friend and not a baby that I have to take care of. So Patsy was a huge success and was on F&B's line for through the 30s, and there was even a reissue in the 40s. Very cute doll. Now this is what he started when he did Bubbles, Dimples. He would do knockoffs of his own dolls. So Patsy was so popular that American Character asked him to do a doll, and he did this doll, Sally. Now, he did multiple Patsy knockoffs, but I think Sally was one of the most successful. I think she's cute, and she looks a little older than Patsy, not as stylized. I think she's kind of an adorable doll. Excuse me. Okay, I just drew this in. This is my doll, and I think she's one of the, I love Patsykins, the 11-inch. She's sometimes called Patsy Junior, but 11-inch doll, she's just adorable, and I like her better than Patsy, actually. And another doll popular in the line. Now, I think there were like 10 or 11 different sizes of Patsy. This is a Patsy Ann, and she was 18 or 19 inches, and she was very successful. There was even a storybook written with her as the doll character model. So the 20s were really good for Lipfert. I mean, he had, he had the Dimples and Patsy. So that led him into the 30s, and the 30s were going to be wild. And the start of it, the 30s, was this doll. Of course, Shirley Temple. This was done by Ideal. And I love this picture. This was Shirley with a Shirley trunk set doll. Wouldn't that be nice to come across that in a garage or something somewhere? And these pictures are just wonderful. These were publicity shots of Shirley with her doll. Very, very cute doll. And this, to tell you a little bit about sculpting a doll, to get these multiple sizes, you could sometimes start with a large size doll and shrink the dolls down. Or in a lot of cases with Lipfert, I believe, based on what I know about doll sculpting and doll manufacturing, I believe that he resculpted multiple sizes. So that's why some of the dolls, they all look like Shirley Temple, but they can have this, there is a difference between sizes in the look of the doll. And this is, I love this one. This is a beautiful Campo Shirley. I don't know what size she was, but the doll was made in different sizes from 11 to 27 inches. Oh, and by the way, if anybody has a question or anything you want to unmute, that's fine with me. It won't bother me to do this. The next, another doll in 1933 was the Didy baby for F&B. And this doll was, she had a rubber body, and she had a head that was coated in rubber, or they call it a rubberized compo. So I think it was coated in rubber and then painted, but you could get her wet more. You couldn't do that with the composition dolls, but you could definitely do it with Didy. And she had all these care for things. You could redress her and all this. She was very, very popular in the 30s. And she came in multiple sizes. This is, I don't know if this is original, but it's very sweet. Love this one. And this shows one of the features I think is kind of creepy, but kind of nice about Didy is her rubber ear. She had, on this hard composition, hard plasticky kind of head, she had inset rubber ears. So they were, when the rubber was new, they were soft and could be, you see the Q-tips up there in this gift set. So a really fun sort of dolls. It was really about nurturing this doll. Okay, so you have Shirley Temple, you have Didy, and Madame Alexander's Dion quintuplets. They were made in 1935. Now, the story has it that Madame Alexander was furious that Ideal got Shirley Temple. Although Shirley Temple, I mean, the owners of Ideal went after the Shirley, went after the license and spent something like 6 months trying to convince Shirley's mother that they should do this and all that. So anyway, Madame Alexander allegedly said at one point after Ideal got, who would ever want to exploit a child like that by making dolls? So Madame saw how well it was doing, and she decided to exploit 5 girls for this. So there you go. Another cute little picture of these of the toddler quints on merry-go-round. And then I love this painting. This is Andrew Loomis. He was a famous, well-known, popular illustrator in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And he just did this. I love this painting. And it turns out that it happens to be for sale right now. They don't usually come up, but it is for sale. So if you'd like this illustration for your living room, bedroom, wherever, kitchen maybe, it's only $55,000. This is the toddler. As the quints grew up, the dolls did too. So this is an example of the toddler quint. So the 30s. So from, like 1933, 1934, 1935, you have Deide, Shirley, and you have the Quince. In 1935 or 36, I believe, Lipfert had his dolls represented 60% of the American doll market. His sculpts, those three dolls, 60%, which is just unbelievable. So he had hit on top of hit on top of hit. So then we get into the 40s, and we all know what happens then. It's like, the war starts, so things get a little, the 40s were a little tougher period for everything. At least the first half of it is. But the late 30s, early 40s were the teenage dolls. Now, this was an interesting development. And I wonder if the war wouldn't have happened, what would have happened, how these dolls would have developed. But so you had the nurturing baby dolls, then you had the little girl best, a friend of mine like Patsy doll. This was the Judy Garland teenage doll and the Deanna Durbin teenage doll were supposed to represent teenagers. So it was the evolution in this, the dolls were growing up. I personally don't like these dolls. I think Bernard did better work, but if you find a mint one, there's something really, kind of wonderful about the clothing and, the way they were put together. But these were both done by Ideal. Is that right? Yes, by Ideal. This is an interesting doll. This is a very early little lady doll, and she's on the American Child body. The American Child dolls were done by F&B, designed by Louise Cochran. So they were introduced in 1937, but the body was used by F&B. Louise Cochran's heads stopped in probably 1940, somewhere around there. But this body was used. It's a 21-inch, makes a 21-inch doll. It was used through almost to 1950. So they used it for a good 12 years. So they get the money's worth out of the body. A couple more little ladies. These are wonderful. It's the composition problem and storage problem during these years that it's hard to find wonderful examples of these dolls. But the doll on the left is a 26-inch doll. And the doll on the right, I don't know how tall she is, but you can see the kind of beautiful faces that these dolls had. Human hair wig and all kinds of stuff. However, these two are interesting. During the war, like probably 43, 44, materials were scarce and hard to get, and they weren't allowed to use fibers, plastic fibers or any kind of acrylic fiber for hair. So they used yarn. And so these dolls are very interesting. You can really date them very accurately by the yarn hair. It's either 43, 43, 44. This other doll is kind of interesting too. Still on the Louise Cochran body. I believe she's later. She's got a human hair wig. But to me, she has something of a Tony face, the start of Tony. So I think that Bernard Lipfert was kind of heading in the direction of this look, this Tony doll look. 1947 was a big year for Ideal. They did this Sparkle Plenty doll. It was based on a character from Dick Tracy cartoons. Comic strip. I don't exactly know the story of this, but I think Dick Tracy maybe had a baby with somebody. I don't know. Anyway, there was a baby, and she grew up to be Sparkle Plenty. This doll was very popular, 1947. And this one was a very popular doll, Baby Coos. She was first released in 1948. Now, this is not the 1948 doll. This is the 1959 doll. But she did well in the 40s, and she was re-released over the years in different forms. I love the 59 doll. I think she's very sweet. And this is one of my all-time favorite sculpts by Lipfert. This is the honey sculpt. This is a composition honey on the Louise Cochran 21-inch body. So this doll is about 21 inch. She's human hair, all original. Just a wonderful doll. She has flirty eyes. She's just kind of gorgeous. This is a transition doll where they first made her in composition, but they were later to make her in hard plastic. And excuse me, have to get a drink. Sorry about that. All right, this 1950s, this was the decade for Bernard Lipfert. It's really kind of mind-blowing what happened in this decade until it all came to a crashing halt. But I'll show you how that happened. All right. These, of course, you know, it's Ginny, Muffy, and Wendy from Madame Alexander. This is Bernard doing what he did best, was knock himself off. Now, Ginny was based on Toodles, and Toodles was an 8-inch doll done for Vogue Doll Company as early as 1937 or 38, I believe. So the Toodles doll was in composition all the way through the 40s. And then with the advent of hard plastic, injected molded plastic, they redid Toodles, named her Ginny, and the rest is kind of, you know, little 8-inch doll history. She became hugely, hugely popular. And because of that, you get the Muffy doll and Madame Alexander's Wendy. So it was probably 2 or 3 years later that these two dolls came out. Now, let me tell you what happened, what was happening at the time. With plastics, it was very expensive to get into the molding process. The molds are expensive, for one, even back then. And the equipment that you needed to do injection molding was horribly expensive. So there were companies in and around New York City that had their own molding equipment. Doll companies would go to these manufacturers and just order a doll. So Bernard Lipfert would do sculpts just for the molding companies. And that is why you get so many dolls that if they're undressed or not in a box, you don't know where they came from. They're not marked, or if they are marked, it's kind of a number or something like that. These three, though, are pretty easy to tell. And of course, Wendy was sculpted for Madame Alexander, and I believe she did her own body also. Muffy also may have been sculpted for Nancy Ann. This is just more Muffies. I think she's kind of adorable. And I love Ginny, and especially the way they were dressed. And that's what set some of these different, although the molds could be the same, even the heads could be the same in some instances. What set them apart was the way they were styled. Okay, so that was the late 40s into the 50s, into 52, 53. But in 1950, Lipfert did this doll for American Character. This is Tiny Tears, as you can see. Hugely popular, this doll. She was popular throughout the 50s. In fact, I think she went into the 60s. They did a sculpt change, but she definitely was around for the entire decade. This is a rubber body doll with a hard plastic head, and this has a skull cap, a rooted skull cap that's kind of applied to the hard plastic head. Prior to this, they did use real fur wigs for some of the dolls, but they also came like this with the molded hair. But a sweet little doll. Of the baby dolls he did, Tiny Tears is my favorite. And funny story, maybe not funny, maybe tragic, I don't know. But my parents, when I was like probably 2 or 3, I have 2 brothers, one older twin brother, and my sister was getting a doll. I wanted a doll, of course. So my parents gave us all uh, Tiny Tears dolls. So I was probably 4 or 5, which was very sweet. Um, for some reason, I got the doll with the hair, and my sister got the doll with the hair, and my brothers got the bald dolls. I don't know why. Anyway, my parents were very forward thinking there. This I have to explain. This is these are shots from Meet Me in St. Louis, which I guess are very appropriate for this convention and everything. Very appropriate now. But what I love about this, if you know Technicolor movies, the mid 40s through the mid 50s, the clothing, the makeup, and the hair, it was all this kind of over the top, very clean and very glamorous and beautiful textures and fabrics and color. This, of course, was reflected in dolls. And I think that no doll line shows it better than Nancy Ann with her style show dolls. So these, I think, are breathtaking. These were done on a sculpt that Lipfert did for one of these plastics companies. So Nancy Ann would buy these dolls and then style them herself at her factory. They were great at making clothes. They were great at styling and designing. And some of these dolls, you see them in mint shape. They're literally breathtaking. They're just exquisite. However, the interesting is that this doll lasted maybe 2 years as sculpt. Then they changed the sculpt. So I think that maybe the molding company, the mold wore out, they weren't going to make it anymore. Somebody complained or whatever, and they had Lipfert do a new sculpt. And this is the new sculpt. I'm going to go back, very close to this, but still, just there's a slight difference here. And this is the Mary Hoyer's Gigi doll. And again, Mary Hoyer did the same thing. She purchased her dolls through the plastics company. They did not manufacture their own. And a couple more of the one on the right is, I think, the earlier doll. The one on the left is the slightly later doll. Now I'm coming back to Honey because she made the transition. She's one of a couple of dolls that I think Lipfert did that to me had an animation feel to them. I mean, Disney was big at the time, and the big eyes and the sweet. There was just something about her, and you guys may totally disagree with me, but I feel she has an animation feel to her. I'll get back to that in a minute. But so F&B, who had Honey, remade the molds and made Honey in hard plastic. You can't just remake molds. So what they have to do is they'd have to take a composition Honey and make a mold over her, and then remold, make a new wax, and then remold, make new molds from that new wax. So every time you see a change like that, the doll's going to look slightly different. It may be very minor. You may not even notice it, but that's what's going to happen. So anyway, that happened. I think that happened with Honey. And I want you to notice, I love this doll. This is a mint strung 18-inch doll. But if you look at her, the doll's left cheek, it seems a little fuller than the right cheek. And we'll get back to that. But anyway, this is their, they redid Honey, and they did some beautiful dolls with this 18-inch doll. They did, I don't have a picture of it, but the Schiaparelli doll, they licensed Madame Schiaparelli to do some outfits. I think there were half a dozen different dolls. Those are spectacular. And this one is really wonderful. This is, I love this. This looks so much like those Technicolor movies to me, those costumes that they did. The one on the left is in pink and the one on the right is in green. And I think this costume also came in blue and in different sizes. Now, this is the other animation doll to me. This is Madame Alexander's Maggie head. And the interesting, you don't see this in other lines because Alexander had heads done exclusively for them. That was expensive to do, but they did it. And I always love this head. I think that this isn't a good picture of an Alice, but I think that their Alice in Wonderland with the Maggie head looks more like Alice than anything anybody else has ever done. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful sculpt, and it has a cartoony feel. Now, mind you, with everything I've just talked about, we're still in the early 50s. We haven't, we're not, and this is also in the early 50s. This is Mary Ellen. She's all hard plastic with vinyl two-piece arms. And she was a 30-inch doll, kind of a life-size sort of feel. And if you compare her face to the face of which I have a picture of later, the 24-inch Sweet Sue doll, they're very similar. So it's been said in the research I've done that Lipfert would take a clay sculpt and he would just rework it a little bit for a new doll head. So if somebody else came to him, he would. So if Madame Alexander had this, there's every possibility that he could have resculpted the clay head and given it to American character. I'm making all that up, but that's a possibility. Also, 1951. So see, we're all still in the early 50s. There were a lot of doll buyers out there at the time. This is Saucy Walker, huge hit. All injected molded. She could, she had bendable knees, and she could do everything. They said she rolls her eyes. She had flirty eyes. You could wash and comb her hair. She had that kind of wig and whatever. But I think it's just the classic Lipfert sculpt. But this is my favorite from that period is the Tony doll. She's just beautiful and just absolutely pure Lipfert sculpt. That the features kind of centered and not squished in the middle, but compacted in the middle of the face with full cheeks and a full little chin and beautiful little shaped face. Beautiful doll. That is my doll, the Tony doll, and she's 21 inches. Beautiful, beautiful doll, and it's wonderful to find them in that condition. 1949 is when the Tony doll started, so we're rolling into the 50s. But Tony came in multiple sizes, and again, he may have taken a big doll and reduced it, which is doable, but you can't go the other way. Back then, you could not go the other way. But anyway, so if he did resculpt, he did a beautiful job of capturing, the sweetness of the face in each size. Favorite doll. Hold on a second. I happen to have her right here. Can you see her? Yeah. Oops. Sorry. There she is. Yeah, gorgeous doll. This is Sarah Ann. She's basically a Tony doll. She's 100% the same molds as the Tony doll, but she has Saran hair. The Tony doll they had to license from Gillette to get the name Tony for Tony Home Permanent. And with Sarah Ann, they didn't. The Tony doll had hair that was specially made, developed by Ideal. They had to develop a new glue to glue the wig to the plastic. So that was developed for Tony, as was a coating that went on the nylon hair it was kind of a wax-like coating. So you could curl the hair, a little girl could curl the hair, and then the curl would relax over a few days. So then they would have to curl it all over again. So that was Tony. But anyway, this is Sarah Ann. Again, in the early 50s, these gorgeous hard plastic dolls. These are Sweet Sue's, two sizes of the Sweet Sue. The taller one is the 24-inch, and I think the smaller one is 15 inches. These came in multiple sizes. The thing about this group is that these dolls don't have the same family resemblance that most dolls do. Like Tony looks like Tony no matter what size. The 24-inch of Sweet Sue does not look like the 15-inch. So I think that there was something there. Maybe it was, I have no idea. I'd be making it up, but I just think that there was just something different about the way these dolls were approached compared to the way ideal dolls were approached. Could be wrong, but anyway. But I have a theory about what happened later on, so I'll tell you about that. Anyway, so here's the 24-inch. This is absolutely my favorite of the Sweet Sue dolls. And these dolls, if you're a hard plastic collector, the Sweet Sue dolls are some of the most beautiful done in that period, but they're also some of the cheapest and easiest to find mint in box. I don't know why that is. I think that these are really overlooked by a lot of collectors, but they're really the Sweet Sues are beautiful dolls. Okay, now we're to 1955, and this was, I mean, if you have to, by this time, Bernard Lipfert is well into his 60s, and if late in your career you want to change the game, he certainly did it with this doll. Now, I'm assuming that Madame Alexander requested this body for this doll. Now, Sissy was the first modern doll to have a molded bust line, and that was revolutionary and probably shocking at the time. But what was more revolutionary was the high heel foot. Sissy is the first doll with a high heel foot, and with those two things, you have a true fashion doll. So Sissy was the start of the fashion doll craze. So the kids have grown up from nurturing to child dolls to teenage dolls to a totally adult doll in the 50s, mid 50s. Just kind of a brilliant sort of sculpt. So of course, when Alexander came out with this, a year or so later, they were followed by Ideal's Miss Revlon, also sculpted by Lipfert. So he did the hit doll, and then for another company, he did a knockoff. But this doll has her own look. To me, she really has her own look, and it's really kind of a special doll. For those of you who know what I've collected over the years, I used to collect these and love the Revlon dolls. I think they're really magnificently made dolls. In fact, they still hold up well. You can get a beat up doll now, and cleaning it up or fixing it up is easy to do, and they're still sturdy and beautiful dolls. They really held their own during these decades. But anyway, there were multiple sizes, like there were the diamond print box on the right is a very, very early, it's one of the first year boxes. This is a 20-inch doll with thicker arms, which dates it as very early, as does the diamond box. It's a mint doll, except for the mark on her neck. I don't know what that is. And her hair's a deep red. It looks brown, but it's a deep red, which is really kind of beautiful. And the other is a walking Revlon doll from Sears, done a little later, and she's an 18-inch doll. Now I'm bringing Betsy in, although Betsy McCall was done earlier in the decade. She was done in 52. She was done on the Tony body. When you look at information about Bernard Lipfert, a lot of the times the information will say that he sculpted Betsy McCall. And that is true. He did sculpt this head for the Tony body as Betsy McCall for Ideal. This doll, I think, is adorable. It was made with a stuffed vinyl head, very early vinyl, stuffed head with a glued-on wig. So these heads discolor and kind of warp over the years. So it's hard to find one in what I think is how he wanted them to look. But if you can find one that hasn't been distorted or, turned colors, this one's pretty good. But I've seen better where they're just the sweetest little doll. But for some reason, they didn't do well. And they were only on the market for a year and a half. But this was in the early 50s on the Tony body. Now, this doll, if somebody tells you that Bernard Lipfert sculpted this one, he did not. There was another sculptor, and if I was 10 years younger, I could remember the sculptor's name, but I can't. So just trust me that it was sculpted by somebody else. This was American character, and here's my theory. I think that the Sweet Sue dolls did really well, but Bernard Lipfert messed around with American character and gave them different doll heads that didn't really relate to each other. So American character, I'm making this up. So American character got mad and they went to another sculptor. But anyway, I'm glad they did because this 8-inch Betsy is beautiful. Bernard Lipfert could have, but his 8-inch dolls were like the Toodles. They were chubbier and they were younger looking. And this is a fashion doll by American character. And again, I think this was done by another sculptor because this does not, to me, have the same feel or look as Sissy or Miss Revlon, although they have the same proportion. I just don't think that Lipfert did this. I cannot find, and I will. Oh, does somebody have a question?
Yeah, did he do the Sissette? If he did Sissy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He was doing most of the stuff for Alexander. Yeah. Well past the time when anybody else was working for Alexander. I mean, when anybody was working with Lipfert, sorry. So anyway, back to this though, I think that the Tony was not sculpted by him. So I'll get off of that. If I ever find out, I'll do a follow-up program if I ever find out exactly who sculpted the later Sweet Sue, Tonys and Sophisticates. Okay, 1959 happened. So Bernard Lipfert has had an absolutely amazing, stupendous, mind-blowing decade, right? It was hard to fit, and there were more dolls, but it was hard to fit them all in a program that wouldn't go till midnight. So that was an overview of the most popular dolls and the game-changing dolls. But in 1959, a couple of things happened, and I'll show you what those were. These two dolls ended Bernard Lipfert's reign of 40 years of deciding what a doll, what American dolls were going to look like. So Barbie had nothing to do with anything that looked like a Lipfert doll, or Miss Revlon, or if you compare them to a fashion doll, Sissette or whatever. Barbie looked nothing like those. And Patty Playpal, that is the most interesting story. In a couple of articles, and one told to the author by Bernard Lipfert's granddaughter, said that Bernard Lipfert sculpted Patty Playpal. He did not. He absolutely did not. Neil Eastern, I think I got that right. Estern, sculpted Patty Playpal. Neil was a fine art sculptor who was, because he needed money, he was a young artist at the time, he went into the doll world and was the sculptor brought in to sculpt Patty Playpal. Now, let me show you why I think, a couple of reasons I think that Lipfert is giving credit for Patty Playpal. He was asked by Ideal to sculpt Patty Playpal, and they rejected the doll. Now, we have no idea what that doll looked like now, but let me show you these. This Alexander's Mary Ellen was 30 inches tall, a beautiful little hard plastic doll. And then this is on the right is American character Life-Size Sweet Sue, as it says. These very sweet faces, but they're idealized. There's something about them that are kind of Lipfert doll-like, beautiful, but Lipfert doll-like. And then I look at these dolls. So Patty Play Pal by Ideal comes out, and then so everybody wants to knock her off. So again, the molding companies do a Patty Play Pal body, so you just have to supply your own head. So I think that the Janie doll, which is in the red, was sculpted by Bernard Lipfert. I don't think that the Joni head was. I think the Joni head might have been sculpted by Neil Easton. Now, again, I don't know how I would find out, but they are not, you would never get me to believe that they were by the same sculptor. And the Janie head definitely looks like a Lipfert head, especially if you look at these. These are, I mean, Janie, Vogue's Ginny, and then F&B's Mary Ann. They all come from the same family, and definitely Lipfert. But I just don't think Joni is from the same hand. Anyway, so there it is. So his career is about over. What happened was he was getting into his 70s, well into his 70s, and he had arthritis in his hands. So he was looking at the end of his sculpting career. That he didn't have the computer to sculpt with, because hopefully that'll take me another 10 years. I don't know. This is the doll set that is usually attributed to him as his final group of dolls, and Pebbles and Bam Bam by Ideal in 1963. And that could be, and he was doing a couple of things. I know he did a couple of things for F&B and stuff like this. So, but people were after, Mattel had their own stable of designers and sculptors, and Ideal was using Neil a lot. So I think that, he saw the writing on the wall, but he still did a couple. This one is a big, this is Madame Alexander's Polly that came out in 1965. I think that he sculpted, that Lipfert sculpted this head. I don't know about the body. It doesn't really look like his body, but I think that he may have sculpted this head. But again, I could be totally wrong about this. I'm still researching to find out who sculpted this. But this has the earmarks in my mind of a Lipfert head. Now, observations. You're probably sick of my observations, but you're all muted, so I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. This is the sketch on the left is an anatomical sketch of proportion, mouth proportion to eyes. One of the things that sets Lipfert's sculpts apart is the size of the mouth compared to the head. So this is a 22-inch, a 22-inch Revlon. And if you see the lines beside her nostrils going down to the mouth, you'll see that the mouth in this instance is the same size as, it's not any wider than the nose. And that just really doesn't happen on people. So it's a very idealized and very, actually, for that time, it's kind of an old-fashioned look, because mouths were starting to get poutier and fuller and all that, whatever. And you also see that there's a line down the middle of her face, from the middle of her chin to the middle of her forehead, and you'll see that the features, the nose is skewed to the left in the picture, as is the mouth, and that is so typical of Lipfert. So as a sculptor, and you're sculpting in clay, a sculptor usually has the tendency to work deeper on the side he favors. So in my theory is that he was right-handed, and he sculpted the doll's right side first, and then tried to match it on the left side. As you become more trained, you're able to bounce a little bit more. But some of his dolls come out and they're a little bit twisted. There's kind of a, one eye gets lower, one cheek gets fuller, and the mouth and the nose go off. And that's what happens. So one of the things you can look at in looking at a Lipfert sculpt, if you don't know for sure, is the mouth wider than the nose, and if it's not, then there's chances are it could be a Lipfert sculpt. He also did this beautiful high forehead, which is very idealized, and kind of a triangular shaped face on a lot of his dolls. So a little bit of doll insider stuff. I just thought this was funny. This is he's got Betsy Wetsy for Ideal, Diney for F&B, and Tiny Tears for American Character. All the dolls are out at the same time, and he's saying they're all different. They look like they could be close cousins, if not siblings, to me. But very sweet, all of them. All of them were very, very sweet dolls. This doll was very interesting, and again, I'm making this up. I may get points off for this for making things up, but anyway, this doll is a Jackie prototype. In 1961 or 2, Ideal did a doll called Jackie. It was a 16-inch fashion doll made to compete with Barbie, and Neil Easton did that doll, sculpted that doll. That's known. But this doll doesn't look like Neil Easton. This looks like a Lipfert head, but the neck is definitely not the way Lipfert did necks. He always did a short neck close to the body, even for a fashion doll. And it kind of looks like Lipfert legs, but not. And the arms, it look like a combination. I think that this maybe they could have passed this sculpt from one sculptor to another to see what would happen, and nobody was happy with it. And then they made a few and then dropped it, because this doll was shown in the catalog but never made. So these are prototypes. And then I'm thanking Bernard Lipfert. This is the at the end of his career. I'm thinking with this, I think this is one of the most exquisite sculpts he ever did. This is the Margaret sculpt in composition that he did for maybe I should read it. If you want to these two articles from Doll News are crucial. Norman Mellon wrote something in 2002, The Lipfert Legacy, and Don Jensen. That was a fascinating article up in Bernard's attic, a trove of Lipfert originals. Great pictures. That's a wonderful one.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the program today. We'd like to extend a special thank you to Mr. Robert Tonner, who does so much for all of us at UFDC. We appreciate his contributions so much. And now, if you are not already a member of UFDC, please click on the link at the bottom of the page. It'll take you directly to the website where you can look up membership and sign up to become a new member of the United Federation of Doll Clubs. When you sign up, be sure you tell them Karen sent you. In the meantime, we'll see you next time.